We have a kind of disenchantment with liberal democracy. We've all been hearing about that. But I think what we need to think about is its roots and its sources.
It is time we stopped saying and inventing new diagnoses, because there have been hundreds and thousands of diagnoses in the past few years uttered. And it's the time when we think how we effectively communicate with the voters. If you want to create a political change, what is more important, ideas or leaders? There might be a third way. There might be a third answer. And the third answer I would propose is emotions. I think that if we want to go to basics, we really have to think about emotions. Donald Tusk very wisely yesterday said that the rule of law is the most important thing in a liberal democracy. And if the emotions are negative, if the citizens are filled with anger, with rage, then rule of law will not last. What is the emotion? What is the feeling that made populists' victory? I would say that the emotion is the feeling of loss. Populists channel the feeling of loss into civil war, hatred, and disgust. But these are not only emotions that you can channel from feeling of loss. Other emotions that you can actually make of feeling of loss are good emotions, like empathy,
right,
hope. And this is exactly the beginning of the discussion how we communicate with the voters.
Well, we are coming into an age of globalization and also at crossroad. You know, after 7.5 decades of the major world war and democracy flourished in so many countries and led to prosperity. So I think the global governance system, which led by the US and European and other countries, has actually paved the way for a lot of good things to happen. But as time goes on, I think that now with the technology development, with all the world's explosive growth for so many years, it's time that we have to rethink about the models that we are now in now. We have to upgrade, we have to reinvent. I think the theme of today's conference is reinvent democracy. So I think it's really relevant. I know that China is really a hot issue. I mean, we hear so many previous panelists talk about that. And so I remember, you know, the late leader of China, Deng Xiaoping, which also set up this one country, two system in Hong Kong as well. I mean, he had a famous saying, it doesn't matter if it's a black, white, or white cat, you know, as long as it catches mice. Look at China. For the last 4 decades, China has, you know, lifted 800 million people out of poverty.
Yes.
A 70% reduction of world poverty. China now has the largest middle growing class. All the other middle class is flat, staggering.
And you have more billionaires than any other country.
So you see, China contributes 30% of world GDP growth. It's now a big engine to propel the world development.
I've been thinking a lot about sort of my day job, that is basically bringing the United Nations closer to young people and bringing young people closer to the UN, which I feel is also one of the similar challenges that liberal democracies today are facing. That is how to make our liberal democratic institutions more relevant to people, particularly young people. The change that we have seen through the democratic institutions, as Karolina mentioned, has been very incremental. We've been able to reduce poverty, we've had achievements in educational attainment, health outcomes, but we haven't really been able to bring that transformational change or the radical change. And this came out of a lot of research that we did, particularly with young people who were parts of extremist movements, why they got attracted or pulled into those movements, and the answers were that they do not believe that their political institutions, either in Europe or America, Latin America, Africa, everywhere, to be transformed transparent.
But do you think young people, in your experience, are they turning away from the idea of democracy as we've been practicing it?
First of all, the answer is yes. A lot of young people that I work with, particularly the youth movements that are working on social justice, accountability issues, have a very big trust deficit when it comes to engaging with democratic processes. So that is why I kept emphasizing that we need to have more representation of young people in political institutions, but also in political processes. Then my second answer to that is no. Because I find it very difficult to give a generic answer. We talk about liberal democracies, and I see that a lot of focus we are putting is on Europe and on North America. But also in Africa and in Asia, we have different ways of democracy being implemented. So for an example, if you look at the recent transition that happened in Sudan, it was primarily led by young people. So young people in Sudan, in Zimbabwe, and countries in the global south are actually campaigning for liberal democracy.
We should actually trace very carefully the changes that are being done to the nature of democracy and democratic process due to the social media. There are at least two very important changes. First of them is turning politics into a spectacle. Democratic politics was always a sphere when politicians wanted to gain interest of the voters. It's natural. But never before the spectacle prevailed over ideology, common good, and reforms. So this is one important change. The second is perhaps even more important, and it goes directly to the frustrations of younger generation and not so younger generation, meaning that social media changed the political subject itself. In the past decades, we would define ourselves regarding the class we come from, the gender. But now, the political subject that is created by the social media says, my biography, my experience, this is the most important thing. This is an extremely individualized experience and expression of political moods, of emotions. It means, basically, that the emotionality of the social and political subjects that we have now, that we are experiencing now, is gravely different from the emotionality of people 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. Now, the answer to your question, Stephen, is actually we are still in a struggle for balance. Classical philosophic thinkers like Thomas Hobbes knew very well that the rule of law is not based only on reasoning, because reason also makes failures. Rule of law is based on the proper emotions. So we are in a struggle searching for the balance between the new emotionality of new political subjects and the power and the safety that is given by the institutions, namely reason.
Please join me in thanking this wonderful panel. Great.